An explosion that killed Vladlen Tatarsky, a journalist and military blogger, in a cafe in St. Petersburg, Russia, Sunday, was a terrorist attack, according to the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. His statement Monday came after Russian authorities accused Ukraine of orchestrating the blast. Tatarsky, whose real name was Maxim Fomin, was hosting a meeting on Sunday with supporters when the bomb detonated at the venue, killing him and injuring more than 30 others. Among the injured attending the event was Yevgeny Volodin. He had this to say from his hospital bed.
I was talking to my compatriot, Vladlen Tatarsky. I managed to ask him a couple of questions, and then the blast happened. After that, I left the building with everybody else. Fortunately, the police and ambulance arrived very quickly. I express immense gratitude to the doctors. They are just saints. I take my hat off to them.
A video released by Russia's Interior Ministry Monday showed Daria Trepova, referred to as the main suspect behind Tatarsky's murder, speaking with security forces after her arrest. In that video, she was asked what she had done and answered, quote, "I brought the figurine there, which exploded," closed quote. Eyewitness Elisa Smatrova had this to say.
First, she took the microphone and started asking him questions. And she said, "Do you remember Vladlen? I gave you a postcard." He said, "Is this the one you drew?" She replied, "Yes." Then she continued, "Now I would like to give you a statue." She said that when she entered the cafe, she was asked whether it was a bomb and was asked to leave the statue at the entrance. Then she brought it to the stage and gave it to Vladlen. It was a golden head and a helmet. It didn't look like Vladlen, and everyone laughed, and they put it down. They put it back, and suddenly everything exploded. The smoke appeared, and then everything was like in slow motion. Everyone ran. Those who were nearby were covered in blood.
We discussed the possible meaning and impact of this attack to people inside Russia with Mark Sleboda, analyst and lecturer at Moscow State University, via Skype in Moscow Monday. Mark, one interpretation of that is somebody, whether it's the CIA or Kiev or all of the above or some other people, showing that they can strike. This is the second one now, a bomb attack in Moscow against Dugina, and now this in St. Petersburg, that they can strike on the ground in Russia. What does it feel like there? Like how is this being treated?
Okay, so the target of this terrorist bombing or political assassination, which I think are both adequate characteristics of what happened, was a military blogger, a war journalist who he goes by the name Vladlen Tatarsky. His real name is Maxim Fomin.
Like Vladlen, as in like Vladimir Lenin, I guess it's a contraction of that, right?
No, it's a different name. Vladlen.
Oh, okay.
Vladlen. Yeah. He is. He's being presented as a Russian journalist, which is true, but it's not true. In that he considered himself to be Russian. Right. And the Russian government considered him to be Russian. But he's actually from the Donbass. Right? So this is another case of the Kiev regime using terrorist bombing to kill Ukrainians. Right. Former East Ukrainians that it considers to be traitors or collaborators, traitors to their traitorous putsch regime that seized power in Kiev in 2014. And he is by far not the first, right? There have been hundreds of people killed in terrorist bombing and sniper attacks and incidents like this on an almost daily basis in eastern and southern Ukraine, right? This one happened to take place at a St. Petersburg cafe where Vladin was giving a meeting, an activist meeting on his journalistic work, from a lot of his supporters. But just also yesterday, there was a bombing in Melitopol, right? Former southern Ukraine. Right. Basically the mayor of the Crimean village of Akimovka was in Melitopol, Maxim Zubarov, and a car bombing. There was an explosive device under his car. He was wounded. It's not clear yet whether he'll live or not.
Right.
But this happens on almost daily. Whether we're talking journalists, whether we're talking politicians, whether we're talking officials, whether we're talking activists, for the last 9 years, this regime that seized power in Kiev has gone out of its way to assassinate, with terrorist bombings being one of their most preferred method, anyone they see as Ukrainians. In particular, these people don't anymore identify as Ukrainians after what's happened in the country in the last 9 years, whom they see as traitors to their regime.
Let me just say something here. There's something that really is stands in contrast. Last week, you have the arrest of the Wall Street Journal reporter on suspicion of espionage. He's going to be held for 60 days and put through a process that's going to be an open public process after the investigation is concluded. And there's a huge outcry here. They're talking about the Wall Street Journal calls for kicking all the Russian embassy out of the United States and all this other stuff. Not a word over the murder by terrorist bombing of this journalist.
Yeah, the disparity and the hypocrisy in the treatment of these two things is enormous. And Darya Dugin was,
also a journalist.
Her primary. She was a philosopher and an academic, but she was her primary work at the time was journalism, reporting on what's going on in East Ukraine when she was targeted, and she was an actual Russian citizen. So that was even more pointed, perhaps. But Vladin, it was extremely popular in Russia and eastern and southern Ukraine, and there were at least 30 other people injured in that bombing. Now, the person who carried it was actually a Russian citizen, a woman,
allegedly.
It's pretty.
Seems so. Seems clear.
The investigation. This is what the Russian intelligence, the terrorist committee, is already pointing out.
Right.
So the woman Darya Trubova, she and her husband were both supporters of the West-backed Russian far-right figure Alexei Navalny.
Right.
And they were part of his organization. Her husband is actually in self-exile out of the country. And it seems that the ultimate figure behind this bombing was the Kiev regime, was the Kiev intelligence, the SBU,
right.
Because this was a sophisticated bomb. It was actually in a statuette.
Right, it was presented.
It was presented to him as a gift. So it was probably by remote detonation. It was, not some cobbled together thing. And of course, it was filled with shrapnel to kill and maim as many people as possible in the explosion.
Right.
But her contact appears to have been a former journalist who journalist, quote unquote, who worked with the Russian oligarch, also in self-exile, Khodorkovsky,
right,
and Roman Popov. And he is, again, this is a chain that is being presented really to obfuscate through Ilya Ponomarev, who was a Russian Duma member, like a congressman briefly years ago, who has since defected to Ukraine. And he was the one who has been claimed responsibility for the assassination of Darya Dugin, for the neo-Nazi attacks in Russia, in the Belgorod region. And the SBU is working through these figures that Ilya Ponomarev presents as some type of Russian resistance, but by his own admonition, they are far right, read neo-Nazis,
right,
and anarchists. These are the people that he is leading to free Russia on behalf of the Kiev regime and the CIA behind them. So there's a whole string of really nasty people involved here, but it's pretty clear where it ends up and who was the originator of it. And the purpose, the motivation, to silence any East Ukrainians who speak out against the regime in Ukraine and talk about, getting East Ukraine free of their grip.
Do you think there's any sense of anxiety or fear on the ground inside Russia now as a result of these terrorist attacks?
That's not the reading that I'm getting here. The reading I'm getting is anger. A desire to strike back at the people responsible for this. It's not any particular type of fear. There's very specific people being targeted by these attacks, and like I said, mostly East Ukrainians, or former East Ukrainians, and the Russian people, regard the people of that area as essentially under their protection, and has invited them into Russia now with the referendums that were held and everything. So I think the dominant sentiment in both the public and the media is not fear, but fury.
Thank you very much, Mark. We'll speak with you again next week.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.